Hey everybody, so I just wanted to do a quick video today talking a little bit about saber, and we're going to be looking at French saber specifically. So these have become a little bit more popular in the recent years as there's a little bit of a trend towards lighter fencing sabers. This one's a Castile 16 millimeter, but there's a variety of them on the market. You could also use a 20 millimeter, whatever you're using, but there's a certain weight that I think ends up working for other systems a little bit better. So what we're working from and taking a look at is some of the fundamentals from specifically the 1877 Manuel D'Escrime from France, and then the other one is the 1908 Manuel D'Escrime. So there's a nice old translation of this one, and I'll post a link towards a translation of this in the description of the video as well, so you can take a look at it. But I think it works really well for beginners. It's very simple, easy to understand, good details that are contained in it, and it has some fun things that kind of gets lost out in later fencing that you wouldn't see. So I kind of use a combination of this as well as quite a lot of British military saber and a fair bit of modern Hungarian saber or classical saber in the mix as well. But I'm just going to be going over some of this stuff and sharing with you because I think it's something worth people taking a look at. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is just gripping the saber. So the saber is held with a thumb grip along the back. But one of the mistakes that I think people make is they put the thumb outstretched along the back. What ends up happening is if you ever parry something or your blade gets beaten, you can really sprain your thumb and injure it. So it's actually pinched in between the forefinger and the thumb like so. The old manuals have it like right against the hilt, and that's fine, especially if you have some padding in there. With HEMA gloves, it's really not a big deal, but you pinch it between the forefinger and thumbs, and then these are used as aids to help squeeze the sword. So they're used as aids to help squeeze it. So it just sits in the heel of your palm right there. You can sometimes put it into more of a foil position as well when you're thrusting, but most of the time it's going to end here in this portion and held nice and light so that you can easily use your fingers to control it. That's where most of the control of movement comes from, is primarily through the fingers. So in the manual, there's a fun little sequence that you can do of getting into guard by having the sword low, raising it up, bending the arm, and stepping forward into your on guard stance. But we're just going to really simplify it and take a look at what the on guard stance is like. So the main guard that you're using is primarily tierce guard. So that means your fingernails are down. This one's a little bit unique in that later sources, they tend to have the arm, well, later ones, a Hungarian modern saber, for example, they tend to have the arm pretty low, but the French system, like right through 1877 and 1908, they keep it in almost the same as a foil position. So the hand is actually higher than the elbow. That kind of gives you the vulnerability sometimes of being vulnerable to like rising cuts to the wrist or being hit by like horizontal cuts, but it's really, really fine for point work. So you're basically going to take your on-guard stance here. What you're going to do is the elbow is going to be about a fist away from your torso here, and your body is going to be in line. The balance is going to be about 50-50. You can rear weight it a little bit, but about 50-50 is kind of ideal for me. And usually about 1.5 to 2 feet apart for your stance. So whatever that looks like, you like 1.5, or maybe 2 feet, depending if you're having a deeper stance. But what you're going to do is you're going to keep your elbow and arm, forearm, and guard all in a line with your foot, and maybe even a little bit towards the outside. And so the point of the sword is going to end up being at the opponent's right eye, just barely crossing the line. So that's one of the differences too between modern fencing, is a lot of times you'll see it out here, versus this is still fencing from engagement. So that means kind of like blade contact in the lessons at least. So if you take a look at it here, I'm in my stance. And so the body's fairly profiled. It doesn't have to be totally profiled, but kind of like a natural angled position. The line is crossing. You can see it almost looks like a foil stance. Just like that. And so point level with the eye. The arm is raised slightly, but it's still about a fist away from your body. And the arm is pushed towards the outside. And what's really nice about this guard, the reason it's primarily used is that if you turn it into a cart guard, you can see the arm is exposed. So a tierce, because it's naturally aligned with that side of your body, you're not really exposing much. It's all kind of covered behind. And so the hand will go behind the back. Sometimes in the military, they'd be using it to hold a scabbard though. So it goes behind the back like that. If you want to make a fist or do whatever you want, that's totally fine. Now, there's a lot of videos that already contain the basics of fencing footwork, so I'm not going to go over it too much, but like kind of some of the basic things you see from the on-guard stance are advancing, retreating, lunging, recovering from the lunge. Those are kind of the key ones that you'd be doing. But there's another one in the saber section, which is you don't really parry the leg most of the time. Like you can parry it if you need to, but you're going to step back. And what's neat about the French version of this is that the English one, a lot of the times you'll see them either pull it close up to the legs like this, feet flat, or put it a little bit hind landing on the toe. But they explicitly state to be flat on your foot. So you're going to pull it back and end up flat on your foot like this. But this is really useful for slipping the leg. So as you're kind of practicing your footwork, moving around, add in that every once in a while defensively. And it doesn't matter even if you kind of screw up and they're not really going for the leg, it pulls you back out of distance for a parry anyway. It's a good thing to do. One more sort of quick one worth mentioning is the appel. So the appel is like a slap of the foot. And so how it's usually done is like prior to a lunge, as you're feinting, is you slap part of your foot against the floor. So it's like the ball of your foot, the front part. It's not stomping your foot, but it's just you're slapping that part of your foot prior to a lunge, and it kind of breaks up the rhythm. So if, say, I was doing an advanced appel lunge, it would look something like, you see how that kind of broke up the rhythm of the attack? Those are used a lot in French swordsmanship, and they were since the 1700s, probably before that. But I first kind of noticed it in that like small sword kind of era. Appels are used a lot in feints. So they're still being used, and they still are used today somewhat. You don't see a ton of them. A lot of times it's more of a step lunge rather than the appel lunge, but they're both really good. Something worth mentioning. So the mulina here used is a lot like the British one. So and some of the early Italian ones where they're performed mostly from the wrist and with a lot of use of the fingers. So kind of what it looks like is if I'm on guard in that guard that we had talked about before, our tierce guard, what I'm going to do is make it a circle around my head. And the thing is that I don't want to pull my arm back, raise it up or lower it, but I'm just on my guard. I turn the hand, you can see I'm loosening the grip here, and then I squeeze forward as I want to cut. So that's used a lot to power the cuts, and you can do that from an inside guard or a cart guard, disengage to hit outside too. So those are really good. And so you can practice it kind of without, there I'm showing it with opposition from the shoulder. So I'm putting my hilt in front of the sword and cutting. That keeps you safe. But you can also do it without that and just practice keeping the arm still in that line. Sometimes afterwards, you'll do a little diagonal mulina to recover, and that's covered a little bit more in like the 1908 manual too. So you could practice that as well. So I make the horizontal mulina and then a vertical one afterwards. Gets a little complicated, but that's not really shown. What's shown in the manual is that action. And so that's kind of central to cutting. There are other mulines that you would use in it, but they're just described as saber cuts. So for example, when I go down to cut the flank, still I would disengage and move the point back a little bit, maybe not so far, right? But I would still disengage and hit under. So the first attack we're going to take a look at is the cut at the head. The cut at the head is what the British would describe as a cut number 7, but basically it's just a vertical straight down cut. And how that's done is we're starting from an engagement. So my opponent's sword is on this side, so I can't just force it straight down. And so what I do is I use a mulina, a horizontal mulina, just as showed before. And so I turn it with my fingers and hand, and I cut around to the other side of their sword, straight down at the top of the head. And I do so with a lunge, okay? So if you want, you can practice it without the lunge, where I just turn the sword back and cut at the top of the head. And then I can add in a lunge. And you want to lunge and hit your target. If you're hitting somebody on the mask, you want to hit the target right as your foot falls and hits the ground. So you don't want to do lunge, hit. What I want to do is start my moulinet and extend the arm a little bit, and then hit right then and keep the hand behind. I'm kind of used to letting it go behind me from foil. So I may do that every once in a while, but just like that. So the diagonal cut, it has the exact same beginning as the other one. So from our guard, we're going to start our horizontal moulinet, but instead of ending with a cut number 7 or a straight down cut at the top of the opponent's head, what we're going to do is we're going to slightly angle it so that I would call that a cut number 1, but it's a cut that's diagonal from the right side down to the left, just like that. Or you can let it roll through if you want to. So same kind of thing, you want to land that as the foot falls, begin the mulina before you lunge, and like be starting to extend the arm as you do that. So just like so. Or just like that. So what you're going to do from this one is from our guard position, you're going to tilt the sword. And a lot of times this is actually done from cart engagement, but here they show it from tiers, and very likely the opponent's blade shouldn't be engaged, or if it's engaged, it should be on the inside. But what you're going to do is disengage around, and you're going to come and cut like this. And I believe the source is showing it as a horizontal. So that would be like a cut 6 in British fencing. These are really great attacks towards the face rather than a diagonal one to the face, shown as a horizontal one. So it cuts the right side of the opponent's face. So from our guard position, just like that. And we can show it from the other side here. Next one is the mulina to the other side. So we're on our outside guard here, or tierce guard. What we're going to do is disengage the same way that we did for the vertical cut and for the diagonal cut. And this time we're going to throw a horizontal cut to the face, just like that. So the nails are up, you're in cart position. Most of the time you're going to want to close the line, especially if their sword is there. Of course, you could practice it with the arm straight out as well. But it just looks like this. And again, same sequence, get the arm going first and start some forward motion and then lunge, land the blade on the target at the same time as the foot falls. So like so. Oops. So the flank cut is just a semicircular cut from your tierce guard here. What you're going to do is disengage underneath and extend the sword. And you can add a little bit of rotation in mulina. They just call it a saber cut in the treaties, but you're going to add a little bit towards that. It ends up often being a push cut because the arm is extended as you lunge forward. So it kind of looks like this. The stomach cut is kind of attacking that opposite line. So we just did a sort of cut number 6 towards the outside. And this one's really similar to a British cut number 5. So from that guard, it's the same thing. You turn the hand, right, and rotate the sword. And if you want to wind back a little bit, just like you did on the others with a little bit of a mulina, you absolutely can. So what you're going to do is disengage and cut. And what I like to do most of the time when I make those stomach cuts is roll it around with a cut through and come right back to my outside guard or tierce guard. So it ends up looking like this, but you can also just practice it like this too. Go back. Okay, so it ends up looking like this with the lunge. I have to move away from the side of the ladder there. The next one is called the sleeve cut, and it's really like a manchette or an attack to the sword arm. These are really useful. So what they're describing is that the nails are turned a little bit, and it's similar to like the head cut in that it's a downward strike. But kind of the difference is that a lot of times you have to angle the sword arm in slightly, like I'm doing that. So if I'm in my tierce guard here, I have to angle the sword in like that and hit around it. So the blade is still edged down. The nails are a little bit turned as you do it, but it ends up being a little bit of an awkward cut, but super good to get around their guard. So it just looks something like that. From the side, you can do that on a lunge if you have to. A lot of times you're interrupting a cut, so they'll be beginning a large preparation and you end up hitting them there or opening up. And then finally, the thrust that they show is kind of a hanging thrust. And of course, thrusts were covered in the section before with small swords. So you can imagine there's all sorts. There's carts, there's tierce, there's all sorts of them. But the one that they show here for the saber one, and they also show different ones in the feint section or thrusting to the face as well, is just kind of a low one. But the sword comes out at chest height and you take a hanging guard position. So with the edge up and you lunge forward. So the arm extends first like this, and then you thrust and come back. When you're doing it against an opponent, like you're hitting an object, most of the time you want to hit while the arm is straight out and then you want to push it up just a little bit to flex the blade safely. I can't demonstrate that without a partner. I'll show that in later ones, but a lot of times you'll push it up towards the kind of flat of the blade. But anyway, so we're just going to show it from the thrusting position here. Just like that. So that kind of summarizes all of the basic attacks. We'll look at more of the parries and we'll look at other stuff in it. But I hope this is a good introduction to some of the attacks in French Sabre. And this is something that I think would be easy for people to transition to, but it isn't used for whatever reason.